So this happened a little over a year ago on May 30th, 2018 at 3:31 p.m. I was 20 and my husband was 22. My husband and I live in a small town in the Mormon state. We were both working together at a warehouse. He was pulling and I was checking. One day, about an hour and a half to 2 hours into the day of work, I got a call telling me that my grandfather had just had a heart attack. It was his fourth one in about 3 years. I went to my boss and asked to be allowed to go see him, and I was going to go and pick up my son before I went to see him, as my son hadn't seen his great-grandfather very much. About halfway home, I got this nagging feeling in my gut that told me it was a really bad idea to bring my son with me. At that moment, I rationalized it as, he's just been sick, so I shouldn't bring him to see my grandfather, with him in such poor health. I learned later that that was not the case. I went and spent the day with my grandparents at their home. My grandfather had already been released from the hospital. At 3 p.m, I'd left their house to pick up my husband from work. On the way home, we were taking a really bad back road that is very well known for people having accidents. I was doing the speed limit, which was 60 miles per hour. I looked down not even for a full second to grab a lighter to light my cigarette, and the next thing I knew, my husband was screaming that I was about to hit the rumble strip on the side of the road. My body just reacted with no real will or thought from me, and I overcorrected the car twice. One of the bosses from the warehouse we were working at was directly behind us on the road. When I saw him a couple of days after the accident, he told us that we had caught about 8 feet of air, and we had rolled approximately 7 times corner to corner on the car. All 4 corners were smashed in. My husband had to be airlifted as his humerus was broken, and the EMTs were afraid that it had punctured the humeral artery in his left upper arm. I had major scrapes, burns and lacerations over my entire body and my skull, and some very minor fractures that to this day have created little hills and valleys at the back right side of my head. I have a scar right over those hills and valleys of my head that is roughly 2 inches long. I also had handprint bruises on my arms and neck that couldn't possibly have been from myself or my husband. My husband had to be taken into surgery for his arm. They took him in at 7:30 in the morning, the day after our car accident, and he had had a bad reaction to anesthesia. He had to be hooked up to oxygen and a heart monitor because his pulse kept dropping down to anywhere between 10 and 20 beats per minute. He normally has a pretty fast heartbeat, so he kept losing consciousness because of his heart. It was spiking and dropping his blood pressure. There was one time he lost consciousness that a nurse told me to be prepared to go home without him. This same nurse was on the same road too, and on her way home from a shift. She was the first one to come to my side, and she was there from the moment it happened until the day we left. I owe her more than I could ever say. He doesn't know that this conversation took place. We had my son's car seat in the base of the car. It had been obliterated, and a big chunk of it was thrown about 50 feet from the car. If my son had been in the car that day, he would be dead. He was 4 months old. He is now a happy, healthy, slightly belligerent, almost 2-year-old. I have limited mobility in my left shoulder because my shoulder was broken in the car accident, and the hospital didn't fix it. My husband's arm is still broken, and it will be for the rest of his life. Other than that, we have made a full physical recovery. My husband still has nightmares, and we still deal with the emotional trauma every day, but we are alive. Everything and everyone said that we shouldn't be, but we are. This is the first time I've ever told this story in full. I was told that it's supposed to be therapeutic to get these things out. Well, we'll see how that works. Can anyone explain these things? I was sensitive to the paranormal and always find myself seeking them out. I've had many experiences through my life, but a few months ago I decided I was going to do something I always wanted, and that was to visit the Stanley Hotel. I took a friend that doesn't exactly believe or not believe in ghosts, mainly because I didn't want to travel across the United States alone, as the direct flight was 3 hours itself just to Denver. I brought an SB7 spirit box that I had bought especially for the trip, along with an external speaker that plugs directly into it. I tried it out before I left to get a feel for it, but didn't get anything through it at all. There was no radio station, no voices, nothing. We arrived at the Stanley Hotel. We were given the key to room 213. Upon arrival, I found nothing strange, just a beautiful view. Nothing happened in our room apart from all the lights and electrics in our room weren't working. Later on, we found out that back when Stephen King had stayed there, his room was 217, and our room was actually a part of it. On the second night of our stay, I decided to set an alarm for 3 a.m. to get up and use the spirit box. I woke up my reluctant friend to go explore and use the spirit box as this was the last night staying there. We walked around the hotel for at least 30 minutes, getting nothing at all except for white noise. Nothing. As we made our way back down from the supposedly most haunted floor, I got this indescribable feeling on the staircase in front of our room, so I needed to use the box there. We are talking amongst ourselves and listening out for anything, but we weren't asking any questions or trying to interact. I held the box close to my friend's ear to let her hear a higher pitched noise that I'd noticed coming across the box, to make her aware that I was sure it was nothing paranormal. Then suddenly we hear a clear "hello" from a loud female voice coming through the box. My friend freaks out, but I'm excited. Wow, we heard something. This is great. She wants to turn the box off and go back to the room. I convince her to stay and we start asking questions. Another voice, much lower in volume and clearly a young adult male, comes through and I can't begin to express how I felt. It's a sadness that hit me from nowhere. Both voices kept coming through in this exact same spot on the staircase. Nothing very interesting was heard aside from the male voice. When I asked if he was able to leave here or wanted to leave, I heard, "Help." I also captured some photos of orbs in this spot. Whilst taking these photos, I asked the male voice to let me take his picture. For some reason, I felt connected to him. At some point, the activity stopped and I was still feeling this extreme sadness. We met some people staying in the room next to us that knew the night security guard, and we were able to go into the front rooms that aren't open to anyone staying there. Upon entering the music room in the lobby, the spirit box went crazy with voices like you wouldn't believe. The group said that the doors to the outside kept opening earlier while they were in there, but they were only using their phones and had no paranormal equipment. While in the room, it was alarming the amount of activity the box was giving out. We were getting full sentences this time, and thankfully I wasn't getting the feelings I had gotten earlier on the staircase. I recorded videos on my phone of us using the spirit box in the music room and wish I had captured what happened next. It was the beginning of more strange things to come. I can't explain them, but maybe someone out there can. We got a "who is there" through the box, and it was so loud and clear that the two men in the group along with my friend had backed away from the music room door where we had been standing, but still kept their eyes on me and the box. I freaked out when they ran out, not because of the last question that came through, but because the box was now switching through different stations. I had unplugged it from the external speaker, and when I did this, the noise of the box switching through the stations kept happening. The sound was still coming out of the unplugged speaker for a good 20 seconds. Everyone in the group watched this happening. I still don't know why or how this was possible, but we saw it and heard it for sure. I tried to unplug it throughout the rest of the night and get it to happen again, but it wouldn't. Nothing else happened that night except for a weird dream I had. The next morning we eat at the restaurant and are preparing to leave when my phone dies. I decide I'm just going to charge it in the rental car on the way back. We gather our stuff and check out, after I make a quick stop to the staircase, and we head to the car. I plug in my iPhone into charge. It's already connected through Bluetooth from the drive there, so we go on our way down the road and my phone powers on. I get to the Stanley Hotel sign and stop. Right when I do, the Bluetooth through the car starts saying the car is picking up a call on the screen, but it's from my number. A call from my phone picking up a call from my phone. If that is explainable, please let me know. And that's not the weirdest part though. I pick up my phone and it's not showing a call at all now. Nothing. Then it starts calling again and answers itself. We are now listening to my spirit box and the voices of us and the men from the group through the speakers. I had taken videos on my phone. But how is it even remotely possible that the sound from this particular video was being played through a phone? Played through a phone call that I wasn't making. There's nothing open on my phone either. It was all extremely bizarre. I ended the call and immediately felt the need to say that if anyone was trying to come with us, that they needed to go back to the hotel. Since I've been home, I think about the hotel all the time. So much so that it kind of weirds me out, to be honest. I want to go back so badly. I just watched Dr. Sleep and it made me revisit all the things that had happened to us, and I wanted to see if anyone could explain any of this. This is my first post on Reddit, but after spending time binging these subreddits, I felt like it might be a good place to tell my experiences and not get that "you're insane" side eye. It's weird, you know, but even when you're a believer actively seeking encounters, they're still somehow strange and unbelievable. Like after everything, you still doubt yourself. Anyway, I'll get on with the story. Me and my mum went on a haunted road trip of sorts about a year ago through Virginia, stopping in at strange places as we made our way down to the Shenandoah Valley to hike. We'd booked to stay at this hotel called the Old Towne Inn in Manassas, Virginia, which through forums I had found had a haunted room with a supposedly polite ghost named Lucy. When we arrived, we asked if that room was free, to which the clerk said yes and expressed both surprise and excitement that we had even heard about this ghost. We'd had a busy day and were tired, so we mostly just got comfortable and hung out a little before going to sleep. My mum is a pretty strict skeptic. Though she loves paranormal stuff, as she wants to believe, she's like that with just about everything from supernatural stuff to religion. She said she'd believe if she really experienced something, but she just hasn't. Before we went to sleep, she told me, I don't know why, but I get a sense in this room. I don't know that Lucy won't appear to you because you're not opening yourself up to it. It was a weird thing for her to say, and honestly I was kind of annoyed because I was the one who did believe, and who had dragged her all the way out there to see haunted stuff. But whatever, mums can be weird sometimes, so I shrugged it off and went to sleep. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a scratching sound. I suffer from chronic sleep paralysis and am quite aware of that feeling, so believe me when I say I was fully awake. I could move, I just didn't want to. Even though the ghost was apparently nice, I was still a little terrified. I opened my eyes and could definitely hear that the scratching was coming directly from my mum's bed. I was facing her and she seemed to be asleep. There was no movement, just the noise like something was scratching at her comforter. It was like I could see where the noise was coming from, but nothing was there. Fast forward to the morning. I wake up again and I'm excited as hell to tell my mum about what I had experienced. But it turned out that she heard it too and stayed still as to not disturb it because she wanted to feel even more. She asked if I had felt anything else and I said no. Then she explained how not long after she felt pressure coming from under the bottom of her mattress, like something was pushing up from under the bed, against her feet. We got up and pulled the mattress off, but it was just a solid wooden panel. As a side note, seeing as the clerk was surprised we even knew about the ghost, I doubt it was some kind of trick or mechanism by the hotel to make money. Obviously their income was not related to ghosts. It was strange for sure, and it had my mum a little shaken, but we continued on our trip safe and sound. A couple of months later I brought it up to her because we had never really had a serious conversation about it. I asked her how, having experienced something like that, something she totally couldn't explain, could she reason around it? Like, how do you remain a skeptic after that? She told me that honestly she didn't know how to explain it, and had just been sort of pushing it to the back of her mind and not wanting to think about it. That it was the first time in her life of loving the paranormal and looking for it that she had ever actually experienced it, and that she didn't have an answer. So that's it. I don't know if anyone's been to this hotel, or has any helpful information to give. In retrospect, I'm kind of realizing that most of the strange experiences in my life have been when I was with my mum, and I wonder if she has some sort of gift that she's been ignoring her whole life, and reasoning her way around it so she wouldn't have to deal with it. Anyway, comments and thoughts are welcome. Thanks for hearing me out. We are coming to this community for suggestions on debunking and explaining recent events that took place this morning in our townhouse in Maine. Please, only serious contributions. We usually don't get so shaken up with these things. I will start by describing our setting, and to be sure it looks a lot like the homes depicted in the paranormal activity movies. We, boyfriend 29 and girlfriend 22, live in a 3-story, relatively new construction townhouse with our 2 adult house cats. The ground floor is an open concept eat-in kitchen and living space, while the upstairs has 2 bedrooms, with the master being directly above the site of this episode. Sometime between the hours of 5 and 6 a.m, my girlfriend awoke to a sound. To her it sounded like a broom falling over in one of the downstairs closets. Just a few moments later, I woke up to a second, louder noise which clearly sounded like a heavy item falling off a high shelf. I will preface this by saying that the cats are very active at night and early in the morning hours when they're getting restless and close to feeding time. It is not unusual for them to get up onto the kitchen counter and swat items off. This sounded much different and compelled my girlfriend to go downstairs to see what had transpired. At this point I was half asleep and not really as alarmed by it as she was. When she returned, she climbed into bed frantically, took a few moments and then said, "There's a ghost in our house." She explained that 2 rocks had been forced off of the top shelf of our tallest living room bookshelf and were sitting neatly in the same proximity to each other, but now on the floor. My mind jumped right to the cats. The most athletic cat, 4 years old, would have had to jump from the back of the couch over a 4-foot span to the top shelf. She would have less than a square foot to land on to make it up there without disturbing the other items on the shelf, a few crystal points standing precariously in the vertical position, and a couple of top-heavy handmade figurines, a salt lamp and an aloe plant which she would have chewed at. All items except for the 2 stones were completely undisturbed. As for the rocks, the large one that woke me up is a 4-ounce piece of smoky quartz, and the other is a much smaller, smooth beach stone. Again, sitting next to each other at the same distance apart as they were when they were set on the shelf. They were not originally set close to the edge. We're calling on Reddit to offer up any other explanations as to how these rocks could have ended up this way. There were no reports of earthquakes overnight, and no other source of vibrations in the house. Many of you will doubt what I'm about to tell you, but many of you will believe it. All I really need, though, is some explanation of what I experienced. This all happened on July 27th, 2016. I was 12 or 14 at the time of this incident. I'm now 17 and continue to have vivid memories of what happened. It was just an average summer day. Neighbours were mowing their lawns and their wives were planting flowers in the garden. I want to say that the kids were outside enjoying the weather, but let's be real, it was 2016 and there were new video games being released. I myself was playing Call of Duty, but I had to press pause to run to the market with my parents. I got my shoes on and ran outside to get in the car. That's when I noticed that something was off. I looked around but couldn't put my finger on what it was that was giving this feeling. It wasn't until my mother came out and mentioned that everything looked more red, like a filter had been set on the world. Now, if you've ever seen a solar eclipse, then you know that everything gets dull and greyish, unless you're in the part of the eclipse at the time. This off-coloration of the world was unnatural though. It gave me a feeling of something bad coming, but as a young kid I brushed it off as I was excited to go to the market and get those pizza Lunchables. I'll save you the boring market trip and cut to where things really take off. It was maybe an hour after we got back from the market when my best friend wanted me to come outside. I put my shoes back on and turned off the PlayStation and went outside to join him. This time, everything was different again. It was more red, but with a hint of purple this time. I remember distinctly that the sun was still its usual bright and blinding colour, but the area around it was just a deep purple colour. I assumed that's where the weird colour was coming from. It couldn't have been maybe 20 minutes later that my parents came out yelling for us to get inside quickly. They had a look of sheer panic and horror on their faces. They had been watching something on the TV when it was interrupted with a signal broadcast, like one of those weather warning alerts. But this was different. It showed the sun, but it was slowly cracking, like black cracks just taking over the sun. The warning told everyone to remain inside and to shut and seal all windows and doors. We spent 40 minutes securing all the windows and doors, except for the front door. We were waiting for my grandparents to arrive, and when they did, I rushed outside to help them. This is when I saw the most unexplainable thing. It was a huge crack in the sky, and it was leaking from the sun. It turned the sky a dark purple and dark green colour. It all looked like a marble pattern in a way. For context, Google dark purple marble background and dark green marble background. It looked like neon-coloured marble. It shined through the sky, replacing any blue sky that was left. The crack was making a loud but quiet sound. It was loud enough to hear it clearly, but quiet enough that it didn't hurt your ears in any way. Watching all this happen before my very eyes was startling, but it was kind of beautiful in a way. The sky was unlike anything you'll ever see. I must have been staring for maybe 15 minutes, because at that moment a blinding light overtook my eyes and forced me to shield myself. After it was done, there was a huge sky blue-like being standing in the distance. It was so massive. It must have been far away because you could see it across the entire United States. It had glowing white and purple-like tendrils flailing about, and they cracked like whips in the sky, making small cracks just like the sun had before. My whole family and I were just staring at this thing, not only terrified but intrigued. It lifted both arms and opened its eyes. Those eyes were the deepest and most bloodshot red I have ever seen. It looked up and reached up with its arms, and it opened a huge hole in the sky. Then what looked like massive chunks of purple rock came down, creating this massive tower. It flowed with a green colour but was mostly purple. The tower started pulsing like it was alive. It started slowly like a heartbeat with a very low heart rate. Over time it got faster and faster until eventually it just stopped, cracked, and then broke with a blinding light. Then nothing. I was on the porch with my parents, asking me why I was staring at the sky. They said I had been standing there and staring for about 25 minutes, motionless and silent. I asked them about what I'd just seen, and they looked at me like I was crazy, like I was insane. I spent the next few days inside and unable to sleep. Nobody seemed to remember this incident, not even the neighbours who were watching it happen too. It was as if it had never happened, but I have such vivid memories of it. I don't understand how. There was no way I was dreaming because nothing changed, nothing was different. I know lucid dreaming is a possibility, but there's still rules to that. I probably sound crazy to you all, but I remember it like it was yesterday. It's burned into my mind. I don't know if I was the only one to retain memory of it, but I know it happened. There's no other way I could have these vivid memories of it. If anyone has experienced anything like it, please, let the world know. I need to know what it was. So, this takes place about 14 years ago when I was 8. My dad and stepmom had bought a new house, and the weekend had finally come when my two sisters and I would get to see it for the first time, as we went to my dad's every other weekend. Pulling up to the house for the first time, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I noticed the house was old, but was excited to see the inside. The second I stepped inside, though, I immediately hated it. My excitement turned to anxiety, because the energy inside that place felt so negative and heavy, and just plain dark. I was still excited to see my bedroom, though. My older sister got the room upstairs, and my younger sister and I got the 2 rooms in the basement. The basement was mostly unfinished. It had this gross green shag carpet, but the walls were concrete. The first thing I noticed down there was that there were box elder bugs everywhere. Pretty unpleasant, but again, I was still excited to see my room. The 2 rooms were in this awkwardly placed little hallway. My sister had the first one and I had the second one. She went into hers and I went into mine. This is where it gets a bit weird. My room was very small. I don't even think it was supposed to be a bedroom, as it didn't even have windows, and the carpet stopped at the door, meaning both the floor and walls were concrete. My bed and dresser were already in there, but that was it. I opened the door to this little closet and noticed that the inside of the door was covered in crudely written words and symbols. I don't remember what any of it was, but I know there were random spots that had been spray painted over. Weird. Other than that, and the negative energy, everything was fine. Until a couple of weekends later when my dad and I painted the walls in my room. as well as both sides of the closet door. It was the morning when we did it. Later that night I went off to sleep, happy about my newly painted walls. While I was sleeping, I started to have this super vivid nightmare. It was dark and I was walking around outside. As I walked, I'd see random family members. They'd just be standing, staring straight ahead, and didn't seem to notice me. Then at one point I turned around and all of those family members were standing in a row directly behind me, looking at me with pure hatred. This was the point that I became conscious of the fact that I was in a dream, except I had no control over anything. All I could do was watch like it was a movie. Dream me started running and I was terrified. I tried to force my eyes open. I could feel my eyelids trying to open, but they wouldn't, and then suddenly everything went black. This hourglass icon popped up, turned over, and the dream restarted at the point where I turned around. This happened over and over again. Dream me would turn around, run. I'd try to open my eyes. The hourglass would turn, and repeat. I was eventually finally able to actually open my eyes and properly wake up, but to this day I still have no idea what the hell that was. This is 100% true and not fabricated in any way, shape or form. I love ghost stuff, but don't mess with it because I don't want any bad juju. The restaurant I work in is an old one, but I don't have much history on it and I haven't searched for it. I can tell you that we have a banquet room leading up to a couple set of stairs, which we use frequently for weddings, parties, etc. It was probably a few weeks to a month into my job, around mid-September. I was asked to carry some dishes up to the banquet room so that we had them ready to go for the wedding party. No big deal, I carry said dishes up, having to make several trips. When I get to the banquet room each time, I slightly feel like something is different. I didn't think too much of it and let it slide as I was in work mode. Just to note, I am an individual that is very in touch with how I feel and vibes I get from people. At least that's what I think, or I'm just nuts, who knows. Anyway, a couple of weeks go by and again I am asked to take some dishes upstairs. This was probably mid-October. Being the team player I am, of course I'm going to help my co-workers out. The feeling is stronger this time. It wasn't a sense of goosebumps or chills down my spine. It was just a gut feeling of something feeling off. I finished what I needed to do and went downstairs to jokingly ask the waitress if she'd ever had a funny feeling upstairs. My boss turned the corner looking at me as the waitress answered, and with a giggly smile on her face she says, "This building, mainly in the banquet room upstairs, is haunted." She doesn't like going up there either. My boss, the one who turned the corner, told me about how a ghost hunting team has done EVP in the past, where a voice said a bartender's name. Some other stories I've been told have mentioned bar stools being flipped over like it was closing time, as well as a blood-curdling scream heard out in the hallway, not even in the banquet room. What creeps me out the most about it was that I could feel something off, without ever even knowing the building was haunted. It throws your senses into a whirl. I'm trying to distinguish whether it was a bad feeling, like I should avoid the banquet room while I'm alone, or if it's just my nerves getting the best of me. It's hard to tell whether or not it was an energy that disliked me or didn't want me there. Now that I know it's haunted, I have been dreading going to work because I know I will have to go up there alone again. I make sure that I am not the last person to leave the building because I don't want to risk having any entanglement with the unknown. I also feel that I got the gut feeling as a warning sign something wasn't right and my senses knew it. That kind of tells me to not be alone in that place. I'd love to hear any thoughts or questions or any advice from someone else who has dealt with this before. Hey fearsome friends. Sorry I haven't spoken to you directly for a while. As you can probably tell from my voice, I've had a bit of a cold. My throat feels like I've swallowed bleach or something. Not that I know what that is like, but anyway, I just want to say a great big thank you to everybody who's been supporting my channel so far. And thank you to everyone who has submitted stories too. If you like what I do here on my channel, don't forget to press that subscribe button. And also you can join my Patreon for early access to stories. I love you all, and remember, keep being creepy.